which historic rivalry currently has the most balance? So the cocktail coming together.
Is that a shaker?
It is a shaker.
Wow.
So when you look at the bigger rivalries across the sport, big, schools, small schools, whatever, to you, which is humming at a really nice level? Like both teams are competitive, there's the coaching personalities are there, you have a push-pull, maybe it's a back and forth over who wins every year. Maybe there's a good amount of hatred in the air, interesting players recently. Which is the cocktail that feels the most balanced and is in the spiciest place, perhaps?
There's so many different ways to grade this.
Sure.
I think. And I would be loath to look solely at the win-loss record.
Okay.
When it comes to balance, because I don't know if you could really take that at face value. I think the answer for me is the Iron Bowl.
Really?
Here's why.
Okay.
That game, there was, and you could use the game that we saw in 2021 as a perfect example. There was no reason that game should have been close.
I hear you.
There was no reason that game should have been close. And I think the mark of a true rivalry in college sports is when you've got a situation like that. We talked with Pat Bostic, right?
Sure.
Talk with Pat about the
coming back. Backyard
West Virginia game. Backyard brawl. They were a 28-point dog going into that game. West Virginia seemed on a glide path to the national championship. Mm-hmm. Pitt wins the game 13-9. Defensive struggle. Like, that is the mark of a true rivalry, where even though maybe the records are a bit lopsided, maybe in the case of the Iron Bowl, you've got a team like Alabama that's had so much more recent success. It's almost in a different stratosphere.
Right.
But still, you can have overtime games like the one we saw this past fall, I should say, where it's close. Auburn probably could have won that game if they went for two instead of opting to tie it. That still is stuck in my craw.
Yeah.
But I feel like that game always has the potential to be close. And also, because of Alabama's recent success, it always has the chance to be very consequential around college football. There's a real domino effect.
I hear you.
Because they play in the SEC, because Alabama's always in the running, there's always that added layer to it. There's no shortage of hatred in that rivalry either.
Right.
There's just not. There's always interest. Doesn't matter what the records are. A rivalry where you can quite literally throw the records out.
Right.
For me, that balances the Iron Bowl, because regardless of the other factors, it's just there's always a reason to be very interested in it. Despite the year, the records, anything.
I was all over the place with this one, and I think I settled on Michigan, Ohio State just because of where we are at the moment. At the moment, we are in the shadow of Michigan at the end, emphatically beating Ohio State and flipping the script a bit, right? Beating Ohio State to get to the Big Ten championship game, which they win that game emphatically, end up in the playoff. Now, obviously, they're not competitive in their playoff game against Georgia, but it raised the question of who's going to win moving forward more often, at least to a more interesting point than it has been with Ohio State's dominance prior to that. And then, you in the wake of Ryan Day saying he wanted to hang 100 on them, the COVID year in 2020, and then Michigan taking that personally, and Jim Harbaugh, sort of leaving, but not leaving because nobody would hire him. And so he's back in Ann Arbor, and that there is a quarterback of the future at Michigan. There's always going to be a quarterback of the future at Ohio State. And there is something to me about Auburn not even liking their own coach, which I guess they technically never do, but that the tumultuous nature of Auburn football at the moment has me less excited for the Iron Bowl, and it makes it feel like it's in a less exciting place. Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 make me uncertain about the ramifications of that game moving forward and not knowing what to expect. And I love the excitement around Brent Venables within the Oklahoma fan base. I just don't have a sense for that rivalry with Brent Venables in that top job.
Yeah.
UCLA, USC, I feel like, there's excitement around USC, but we don't know what that is with Lincoln Riley. UCLA, we kind of have a concept for what Chip Kelly UCLA is. Oregon's dominated Washington. Cal and Stanford hasn't had big fallout. You look at that rivalry game. You look at I don't know, other parts of the SEC, Florida, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky. Like, I know Florida, Kentucky is not a rivalry game, but I'm searching up and down. Like Clemson, South Carolina is not in a particularly healthy place right now. And so I think just to the average fan, to the dedicated fan, I think Michigan, Ohio State has the spice and the drinking violence involved to answer this question for me.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair answer.
I'd love for it to be Tennessee, Alabama soon.
Yeah,
that'd be great. LSU, Alabama.
I thought about Texas and Oklahoma because that's another one that always feels like it's going to come down to the wire. But I think where I'm really hung up on is the Iron Bowl always has some sort of national significance. Not to say that Texas and Oklahoma doesn't.
Right.
But Alabama is the apex predator. They're the apex predator all the time. And so always having that game at the end of the season that against their hated rival that could knock them off the pedestal, maybe knock them out of the running. That's interesting.
If you talk about national implications of the game as a part of your cocktail that you deem to be important, I get that. If we get rid of that, if we're just intent on making like a fireball cocktail, if we're intent on the spice, right? That like, what was that in your cocktail? I think it's the Egg Bowl. I think the Egg Bowl is probably the truest form of a distilled college football rivalry. It's interstate.
I do like the Egg Bowl. It has only because of the name. I love the Egg Bowl.
The Egg Bowl has a great name. Also, Thanksgiving. So it's sort of set aside as an important, like the NFL can't fully make up its mind how many games they want to play, whatever, on Thanksgiving. College football sort of narrowed it down, at least Power 5, FBS, whatever, has narrowed it down that on Thanksgiving, we had a little bit of Texas A&M a few years ago, which would be great if that came back, but I think it will. The Egg Bowl, in the way that it stands alone on the schedule, and also the unique qualities of the Grove and cowbells, just in terms of a game cocktail, it's really going to mess you up. And it in every facet, right? On the recruiting trail, with NCAA violations alleged, with the back and forth nature of the game, sometimes with the coaching personalities, with Dan Mullen and Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin, obviously Matt Luke. I think that is probably our as a sport most electric rivalry.